Hi, writers. Liz Whiteacre here, and today we're going to talk about why attribution is important in writing for both college and careers. Our objectives this week are to identify different types of sources and recognize how the type of source will influence how we use that information and present it to our readers. We'll also think about how to apply evaluative criteria to judge sources' trustworthiness and how to write effective summary, direct quotation, and paraphrase. As we do all of those things, we will be introduced to the Modern Language Association Style Guide and also review when we need to provide attribution in different writing situations. Why is it important to think about where our sources come from? Building on a foundation of quality sources does so many things for you as a writer, as a researcher, presenter. Having a diversity of sources is important. And by diversity, I'm thinking about a variety of different places where information is coming from. It depends on the topic that you're taking a look at, and of course, your rhetorical situation, the message you need to send, and who your readers are or your listeners. But considering different points of view, right, considering different types of information can be really helpful as you are putting together your explanation for people to understand what you're saying. You might be going to sources to be able to provide illustrations or data that supports what it is you're saying. Reliability is also important, and that goes to trustworthiness. Thinking about whether or not you can rely on the information to be accurate is important. And also, is it going to continue to be there? Right? Or are we talking about maybe a blog post that'll go up and down really quickly overnight? Also, credibility. What's the reputation of the source that you're getting your information from? Can you trust what's on the page or what you hear or what you see? So all of those things need to be considered as we are going through sources, synthesizing sources, and deciding what we want to present to our readers. There are also a bunch of different types of sources. You're already familiar with these ideas, but the depth that a source provides, and if you think about depth, think about a swimming pool. How deep do you go? Are you kind of sticking your toe and just starting to walk into a pool where it might be 6 inches deep? Or are you just diving off the diving board into 12 feet of water and completely submerging yourself? You also want to think about the breadth of a source. And the breadth, think of a map. Are you trying to cover, right, the entire length of the United States? Or are you just trying to find a place near campus to get a great cup of coffee, in which case you're zeroing in and looking at a much smaller amount of information for what you need? Scope can also be very important. Think about a periscope on a submarine, right? It kind of comes up and then it limits your field of vision, and you have to kind of turn physically in order to be able to see what's right in front of you. And so different sources provide a different amount of scope or focus. For example, let's say you are interested in a recent event, right? And you hear about it on the radio while you are driving. And so you get just a little bit of information that piques your curiosity. So later on, you might go and look up on your phone a couple of news sources and get a little bit more information. And then within that, maybe you see the name or two of some experts who've been brought in to comment on or provide more information about what's happened. And you follow up and you look up those people and you realize one of them has a podcast. So you go and listen to that podcast to see what they think about what's happening within the context of other things. And that might lead you to this great book, right? That has a bunch of information about how this thing has happened in the past. So you're kind of moving through different types of sources in order to get at different depths, breadths, scopes of information. It's also important to think about the relevance of your sources. You might find a great article that tells you exactly how students are using computers, but if that information is from the 1980s, is that information still applicable? It may or may not be, whether or not you're talking about the history of how computers have been used with students, say in elementary school, versus what's happening right now during COVID and the e-learning that's happening in students' homes. It may or may not be relevant. And so always make sure that you're considering that. And of course, the reliability. Can you trust that? And when we're taking a look at our readings at SkyPack, and also considering the criteria that we use to judge whether or not we trust sources this week, be thinking about how the criteria that you're using to decide whether or not you want to use information might change depending on the situation. Let's get into some of those different criteria that you might use to judge a source's trustworthiness. So first of all, where did you find the information? This is something that you judge all the time and very quickly. Right? You hear a rumor about a friend. Who told you that information, right? Was it another friend who loves to gossip and stir up trouble? Are you going to trust that in the same way as, oh, I heard it from that person's mother? She told me. That's somebody who might hold a little bit more weight in terms of trustworthiness. Although you might think, well, that friend never tells the mother much. So the mother might not be the most informed person. I'm going to go take a look at that person's social media page and see what that person has posted. So you're already an expert at this, right? As you're translating that into the types of sources and information that you want to pull in to represent you and your ideas when you're communicating to audiences in the academic setting and all of your different college courses, perhaps also in those situations where you're giving presentations as a student to organizations off campus as part of a conference, or maybe you're doing it to an organization in terms of service learning. And then later on, when you're presenting yourself at job interviews or representing a company that you're working with to others in the future. So that is the first place to start. Where did you find the information? And is one, that an appropriate place to find the information? And two, how does that affect how much you trust it? Another thing to think about is, does the source of information identify who wrote it or who said it? Do you have an idea of who the publishers are? Who's paying to put this information out there? Are there sponsors of the information or maybe affiliates? If you can't answer the question, right? Let's go back to the idea of your friend who you just heard a rumor about. If nobody knows where that rumor started, how much credence are you really going to give it? You might find a source that sounds great. Oh, that's perfect. That's totally what I want to say in my paper. But if you don't know who said it or who's paying to give you that information, or I don't know, like, is it really accurate? This doesn't sound like what I'm hearing in other places, but it agrees with me, right? You might want to red flag and think about, can I find that information? Sometimes you might also, if you're looking at opinion pieces, look up the reputation of the publisher or the author. You might find out, oh, wow, this person is a journalist, but they have written for the last 15 years on this political topic or on this social justice topic. They have a lot of knowledge, and so that can be helpful as well. When was it published? This goes back to that idea of, is the information that you're finding, you might find a great graph, great statistics. is it within your time period? Does it make sense to use that to make an argument for something or to illustrate a point that you're going to want to make if that's not the state of the world anymore? So make sure you keep an eye on the copyright date if you're taking specific information and trying to apply it to a specific situation, and make sure that they align and you can kind of make those logical leaps in between those two different things. And if not, you might say, listen, 30 years ago, this is what was happening. Right? And I found another source, and this is what's happening now, and this is the connection I make between those two things. That would be very appropriate. This is what's happening 30 years ago, therefore tomorrow we should do this, ignoring those 30 years worth of growth and knowledge and advancement. Then maybe that's not something that you want to recommend to your readers. This seems like a no-brainer, but thinking about whether or not what you're reading makes sense. When you're doing a research project, preparing for a presentation, getting ready to share stuff with clients, with professors, classmates, all sorts of people, you'll come across things that, well, wait a minute, that's totally out of line with everything I know about this. Or, boy, I can barely read through this sentence. There's so many typos. This logic doesn't make sense to me, right? I've never heard of this before. That could also be a red flag for you to pause and carefully look at whether or not the information that you're getting is relevant and reliable and something that you want to use to represent yourself and your ideas in your own work. It's also connected to the idea of, is your source of information being transparent about the sources it's using? Do you know where that blogger who's recommending that you put some potentially toxic element or chemical on your elbow, right? Do they suggest where they got that idea from? Or, hey, look, this article says that, yeah, you should totally put, I don't know, lemons on your eyelids. Whoa, that might be, So I would pause there and say, well, lemons are pretty acidic. Should I be putting that on my very gentle skin, fragile skin on my eyelids? So you're pausing to see, okay, is this linking to other things? Has a new scientific research data come out that might inform and re-educate me on why this could be something I'd want to do or something that could be safe? Is it connecting with other sources? Is it pointing you to places you can go to learn more and follow up? Is it referencing other people who are in conversation about this topic? So keeping an eye out for things that are kind of isolating themselves, not telling you who wrote it, not telling you where any of the information comes. Again, do you want to base your work on something that other people might not trust? Last, what's its agenda? This kind of goes with the idea of bias, but I like to think of it in terms of an agenda. When I come across something on my social media feed and I start reading the article, well, oh, this is an interesting article, but I kind of realized halfway through that, well, really, this is an ad, right? Trying to sell me a particular product. Or it might be something that's just meant to inform me. Maybe it's a news article that says, hey, this happened. It might be trying to persuade me to follow up and do something. It might be arguing a point and presenting other points of view and trying to help educate me on why I should agree with the person who is making the argument. It might try to be influencing my behavior. Right? So having an awareness of that rhetorical situation that you're participating in as the audience member, right? Kind of flipping that and thinking about, okay, this writer, this speaker, this filmmaker is trying to communicate this message to me for this purpose, can help you get a handle on how you're engaging with the information and then how you want to use that information when you pass it along to your audience. So why is attribution important in college? So attribution is giving creds, right? Saying, oh, I heard this great joke that Bob made, right? And giving him credit rather than just being like, listen to this great joke that I made up on my own. It's important when you are in an academic setting because of all the things we've been talking about around ethical, responsible research, avoiding plagiarism, avoiding cheating, understanding when you need to give people credit is great practice in your assignments in college, and also when you're just living with your peers and engaging with people in conversation around the college and in the classroom. I pulled this graphic, and it's one that really spoke to me because I love this idea of everything being interconnected, that we have at our foundation ideas of empathy, trust, values, our ethics, and we're kind of coming up out of that ground and presenting to people our core, our mission, our vision, what we stand for, what we are trying to communicate with other people. And then that's going to branch off and become part of relationship building with the people around us, our audiences, collaboration, engaging with other people's ideas and letting our ideas evolve, right? Communication, decision making. So when you are moving forward and you're thinking about incorporating sources into your writing, presentations, blogs, 20-page research papers, annotated bibliographies, being mindful of how you're using information and giving people credit helps you build those strong foundation to move forward the rest of your life and do those things so that people see you as, well, that person really, you can rely on them to give you honest answers, informed decisions, and you'll be a go-to person when people are looking for a leader in the future. And it keeps you out of trouble, right? So in order to achieve these things, we're going to be exploring this week writing effective summary, direct quotation, and paraphrase. Those are 3 ways to incorporate other people's writing into our work. Other things that you can do would be incorporating clips, right? If you are going to insert into your blog, your paper, etc., PowerPoint presentation, maybe a clip from a TED talk, incorporating video, that would also need to be provided attribution. Here I have a picture of the film. So if you notice right down here, I'll put the arrow around it. I've provided an attribution on where that graphic came from. Hyperlinks can also be helpful if you're trying to pull in different images or take people to things that are going to be helpful to them. So summary, I put the big screen here to remind us, is putting other people's ideas into your own words. And it can be really effective when you're trying to present kind of a big idea or a lot of information in a small space. So for example, you would not want me to paraphrase or direct quote the movie I saw this past weekend. You would want me to take that 2 to 3 hour film and let you know what it was about in 1 or 2 sentences to get the conversation started. So that's what summary does. You read an article and you say, well, this was the author's main point. This is what the film was about. This is what the professor said in class. And you're distilling that information, not providing people a blow by blow. Direct quotation would be taking verbatim or exactly someone else's language. So notice we're using the word idea here. So the idea is really what we're giving credit to. And sometimes we give credit to the idea when we're expressing it, and sometimes we give credit to the idea when we take that language from someone else. Direct quotation marks, just like are here in the graphic, are put around the text that we borrow to signal to readers that it comes from another text. And here I have kind of a mock thing when you see that citation right here, you're expecting to know where the source comes from when you're working within the MLA format. This is really effective when you're trying to share with readers something that is really hard to put in your own words. Perhaps the writer was so effective at explaining it. Oh, when you're trying to explain it to somebody else, it might take twice as long. Or maybe the language is really unique or specific, and you want to be able to incorporate exactly how the person said it into your words so that you're able to maybe analyze that or talk about it or share with your readers so it's very clear to them what's coming from the original source. Here we go. Paraphrase is zeroing in. So you're still using your own ideas. You're still using your own words to represent other people's ideas, but you're looking at a smaller amount of text, and the way you're presenting that idea often mirrors the original. This is that patch writing that we're learning about in SkyPack, where we can sometimes get in trouble. Sometimes we paraphrase too closely, and we might take the exact sentence and only swap out one or two words, or even forget to swap out any words and forget to put direct quotation marks. So when you're paraphrasing, you do want to be really careful. Personally, what I choose to do when I want to work on a very small amount of text from another author's idea, what I'll do is I will write my own idea, and when I get to those couple of words that I just cannot come up with anything, I'll put those in direct quotes. So I am creating a sentence that's incorporating all three of these different techniques together, and that's something that we'll have an opportunity to practice with many times throughout this course. When do you need to provide attribution? Right. There are three things that you need to keep in mind, and if you can remember these three things, you are going to do great and stay out of trouble. The first is stopping whenever you find yourself sharing someone else's idea, right? If you learned it from somebody else, probably you need to include an attribution. And this goes for ideas, images, words. I should have probably also put on here audio, right? Film. You need to stop and provide attribution. So you're turning to your notes or you're copying and pasting something, stop. You need to provide attribution. The second thing you need to know is what style guide do you need to use? We're going to talk about MLA in a moment. That's what we're using in this course, but there are a lot of different style guides that are out there. Depending on the discipline you're in, math uses a different style guide than English, and we use a different style guide than psychology. So what you need to know is what's expected of me. What do I need to use? And if you're in a class, oftentimes that information is found in the syllabus, or you can ask the professor what they prefer. Or you can also look to, if you're thinking about blogging or you're thinking about writing in your field as you get jobs, looking at what's the standard in the field, how are other people presenting their sources, or going to your professional organization to find out. Once you know what style you need to use, then find the rules, find the handbook. You don't need to memorize this stuff, right? You just need to know, when do I need to cite and how do they want me to do it? That leads into the third step, which is when you need to create a citation, which would be a type of attribution, move slowly and follow those rules. Take your time. Do it right the first time so that you don't introduce a lot of errors into your text. And if you ever have a question while you're practicing this stuff in college or you're writing the first few things at your new job, ask. This is a learned skill, and everybody who has come before you is very happy to help you out and give you some tips on what works for them so that you can use and improve those things yourself. In this course, we are going to be using MLA style. MLA stands for the Modern Language Association. That is a professional organization that English departments belong to. You'll also see the Modern Language Association be used by some other disciplines. Some of the global languages will use MLA, and sometimes you'll see it in some other disciplines where their professional organization does not have one that they prefer to use, and so they'll borrow MLA. Another one that you'll see probably in your first term of college would be APA style. That's the American Psychological Association. And so if you're taking a psych class, Psych 101, you'll be asked to use APA. In biology, you might be using CBE, right? If you're in sociology, you might be using ASA. So all of these different style guides are stemming from professional organizations that are setting the standards for the field. How are we presenting our work? And how are we presenting how we use resources in a consistent way? So professionals in the field, as they're publishing their work and reading their work, they can rely on a standard. And then we borrow that in the college setting as we're preparing you as a professional. There's a link if you want to follow this up with the PowerPoint slides in our resources page that you can follow to check out the Modern Language Association's website. They also have information about their style guide there. And then Purdue OWL, the Purdue Online Writing Lab, they also have a lot of wonderful resources, and we'll be referencing them as a handbook as well during this course. Looking ahead, so we are going to get a handle on when we need to cite, how we need to cite in this course using MLA, and those different techniques we can use to cite, like summary, direct quote, and paraphrase as we create our first essay. This week, we're going to be working on a brainstorm for our responsible researcher essay, in which you take all of the different resources that we've been using to explore how to be responsible researchers in college and share your personal plan of action. What are you specifically going to do to make sure that you are responsible when you write, when you research, when you present during your college career and leading on into the future? The brainstorm for that is due this week. And then next week, we'll follow up with another look at some of these different issues, and the final paper will be due. So if you have any questions or concerns about brainstorming that paper using the method of your choice, get in touch this week so we can talk about it. And make sure that you review the list of possible sources for that paper, both on the assignment page and linked throughout SkyPack. I can't wait to see what your plan is to be a responsible researcher.